Welcome, Matt Anderson.
Good evening, everyone.
It's over
That's
here.
not me.
Sorry.
Oh, this clicker will work?
Yeah.
All right, good. How are we all? Is it good? Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt. I'm a product designer at Canva. I'm responsible for the design system. If you aren't familiar with Canva, we've been going through quite a bit of growth recently. We just passed 10 million monthly active users. We're in over 100 languages around the world. And this year alone, we've added more than 50 people to our Sydney office. And it was about a year and a half ago that we noticed this sort of level of growth came with a few problems. Engineers were finding things very sort of complex. Any changes that we wanted to make were taking a very long time. Onboarding new designers because of the complexity of the code base took a very long time. Designers were recreating interfaces for very similar sort of needs, recreating buttons, dialogues, and inputs, type styles every single time. In terms of user-facing issues, we were moving into new markets as well as new demographics and a lot more new languages, and obviously that sort of slowed down the process there. And there was, of course, a lot more new features and improvements that we wanted to get out to our customers. And as the company grew and the team size increased, product complexity increased, inefficiencies grew along with them. And that's exactly the kinds of things.
Yeah.
Good. Sweet, working.
You got it?
Yep.
Thank you.
So that's the exact kind of things that our design systems aim to solve. They provide guidelines, constraints, and principles. They provide a common language for engineers, designers, and product people. And they aim to solve problems once so you can move on to other and bigger problems. So we, as of a year and a half ago, set out to completely rebuild our product. Those problems were coming too much, so we thought the best approach was to completely start from scratch. So the first part of that process of setting up a design system was an audit. Nothing too complex. We literally just went through the whole product, taking screenshots and zeroing in on things that we wanted to improve. For the most part, we were recreating a product that we already had, but there was, of course, things that we wanted to change and improve, such as our onboarding. So we made sure to factor those things in as well. And once you go through this process of auditing, and you get to a good understanding of the kinds of components and things that you need to build. So from there, we compiled a list and started to design. So we started with the most simple forms of elements, things like colors, type styles, and iconography. We call these things base components. And once we've defined these base components, we can move on to slightly more complex components. So you can imagine if you take one of those colors, one of those type styles, and an icon, and compose those together, you can make a button. And if you repeat that process, you can create things like alerts or inputs or badges. And if you repeat that process enough, nesting components inside of components, you'll eventually end up with something that resembles a product. And the really nice thing about breaking the process down in this way is we can get very specific about the desired outcomes for each of these components. As an example, as I mentioned, we recently announced that we're in over 100 languages. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of different affordances that we have to make for each of these languages. Languages such as German are known as being quite verbose, where words can be 2-3 times as long as they are in English, or Southern Asian fonts or the glyphs in the fonts are known to be quite tall when compared to their Latin counterparts. Another example is colour. So things like colour contrast or the accessibility of colours for colourblind users is made a whole lot easier when we can look at colour specifically. And the really nice thing about breaking down this process is it makes the relationship between designers and developers a lot more easy. We can sort of zero in and focus on specific improvements and use cases or edge cases that we want to improve. So that's sort of the process that we went through to set up our system. But in terms of what makes up our system today, we have three main components. The first up is Storybook, which is our living style guide, and this has all our components that we use in the product in it, has all their states and all their variations. These are the actual components used in the product. They're not screenshots or representations of the final thing. They're the actual things. So we can, if you see on the left-hand side of the screen there, we can actually go in and change the text or toggle things on and off, change the language, flip it for those different languages as well. So it's pretty cool what we can do. And this sort of level of tooling in Storybook allows us to do a lot of other interesting things. So we can do something called branch build. So if we're working on some changes to a particular component or a particular feature, an engineer can come to us with a special URL, and we can then perform testing on that URL or provide feedback or iterate on that feature or changes before it's merged in and everyone can see it. Next up, we have visual diffing as well. So if we say change the color of a button, we can see very quickly all the instances throughout the product where that button is used, and we can then decipher if it had the intended outcomes or not. Next up, we have Sketch. And Sketch is our UI kit, and it's pretty much a one-to-one map of what we had in Storybook. Our libraries are set up in a pretty interesting way in Sketch. So we have a global library, and our aim with the global library is to put as much as we can in that library. So we of course have the logos, colours, icons, and so on. But there is of course things that specific platforms need which aren't so relevant on a global sense. So each platform has their own library. So things like the keyboard on mobile is not so relevant when you're thinking of a desktop sort of environment, or digital design, which is our marketing side of things, has a lot of things like headers and footers which aren't so relevant in terms of our product side of things. So splitting the libraries up in this way means that we can quickly and easily turn these libraries on and off. So for the most part, I work on the web side of things, so I can turn off digital design and mobile and just work nicely within there. But there is of course times where I need to work on the mobile side of things, so I can turn the mobile library on and have access to all the mobile specific components. Each of these libraries has an owner. So as I said, I mainly work on web, so I'm not sort of familiar with the specifics of the other platforms, but each one of these specific platforms has an owner, and that's the person responsible for maintaining and making sure that their library has all the things that they need. Our UI kit in Sketch is version controlled using Git. It's also distributed automatically to all the people that use it. This places a little bit more of the complexity on the side of those owners, but it makes the end experience very easy. We originally sort of made an assumption that it would just be designers using the kit, but we now have somewhere in the vicinity of, I think, 25 to 30 people in the company using the kit, anyone from sort of engineers right through to sort of product coordinators. So a little bit more complexity on the side of the owners, but it means that the experience for the actual consumers is very easy, and we don't sort of force them to download or learn specific software just to get access to the kit. For the most part, it just works. And the final bit is our documentation. So this isn't exactly what it looks like at the moment. This is kind of our end goal, but the reality is that it's sort of spread out throughout hundreds of documents at the moment. which is a bit of a problem. The sort of main aim of documentation is to provide reasoning for existing solutions, help users or the users of the system to understand how to use and compose components, and provide guidelines on how to contribute back to the system. And the way that our sort of documentation is set up at the moment doesn't sort of fully service those needs. So that's something we're sort of wanting to invest in a bit more heavily. So they're the three main parts of our system at the moment. In terms of what we want to kind of do next is set up a dedicated design systems team. So at the moment, or if you look at sort of systems like the ones at Google or Airbnb, GitHub, they have dedicated teams, and the systems there have literally taken years to get to the state that they're in at the moment, and I can't see Canva being any different. So we're looking to set up a team, hopefully with a designer and an engineer or two from each of the platforms. Next up, which I just touched on, is invest more heavily in our documentation. If we started the whole process again, it would have been something that we would have started a lot more early on in the process. At the end of the day, the design system and the documentation is there to serve the needs of our team, and if it's not doing that job and making it easy for the people on the team to use, access and contribute to the system, then it's not doing a very good job. And lastly, something that I'm personally pretty interested in is bridging the gap between engineers and designers, or rather the tools that the engineers use and the tools that the designers use. So we have these two independent parts at the moment, which is the storybook and the UI kit. And obviously having two tools mean that there's the opportunity for those two things to get out of sync very easy. So one of the things we sort of want to look a bit more closely at is tools where maybe we can generate the UI kit from code, or even use the actual components and design using those within the browser itself. In terms of some takeaways, if you're looking to set up a design system, I'd say start now or start as soon as you can. Our system has been such a multiplier in terms of our productivity. Things that used to take a day or so to do now take an hour or two. Start small. You may not have the luxury of starting from scratch like we did and completely rethinking the whole experience. So start with something specific. 1 month you may choose to look at colours, so you go through the whole process for colours, and then the next month you may choose to look at your icons, and very quickly you start to make decent headway. And lastly, but very importantly, it's important to cater the system to your needs. You may be looking at what we've done here, or systems like material design, or what Airbnb or the Googles have done, and think that it's not quite relevant to your needs. And reality is it's probably not. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, so take the time to research and look into what your company or product needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Oh, good. Lots of hands. Don't need to go on my questions. I might say mine anyway.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for the great talk, and also thank you for organizing this event, IxDA. So I'm in the position that you probably were a couple of years ago, trying to set up a design system before it's too late. In some ways, it's already too late because the whole visual vocabulary is in a big mess. I have a very specific question, and we can speak even after the event in more detail. Now, our design team does not have any engineering support. There's no internal front-end expert as part of the design team. Obviously, there are people in the engineering side.
Mm-hmm.
They're always busy with other work. In your experience, can you build a design system sans the need for the actual framework or the coding part of the component, which will obviously make it easier to recreate those components when they are used in production? So what I'm getting at is you can obviously try and create the patterns and the context in which you want to use, let's say, an alert box, when to use it, when not to use it, which I'm sure my team can manage. But where we're struggling is how do you then document and share that with the engineering team so that if there's a new engineer who wants to now use that pattern, they have a certain piece of JavaScript that they can just pretty much pick up, is what I understand, and reuse, right, in whatever context it needs to.
Yeah. I think the important thing or way to think about a design system is it's not a sort of specific tool. It's sort of more a kind of philosophy or a way of thinking about systems. So at the moment, and I sort of touched on kind of some of the things that we're trying to solve at the moment, but those sort of two sides, the design side and the engineering side, are sort of a bit more loosely coupled than would be sort of nice. But I think it is possible. Certainly the sort of nice tooling and things that we have has made it a lot easier. And I think it sort of makes it a whole lot easier if you have a bit of a champion on the engineering side of things as well, because at the end of the day, whatever we do as designers kind of has to go through engineers, and I'm sure we've all kind of done designs where you sort of have this beautiful pixel perfect design, whatever, but then it sort of goes through the hands of an engineer and it doesn't quite sort of live up to your sort of idea of what you wanted. So I think it can be done. It's a lot harder, but if you can sort of find a champion on the sort of engineering side, and we're very lucky at our work that a lot of our engineers do care about that sort of thing, then it certainly makes the whole process a lot easier.
Thank you. Hello, as an engineer, sorry. So a quick question is, how did you retrofit this with the existing Canva product, or is this a from scratch entirely for the V2 rebuild?
It's built on top, so it kind of, for the most part, the front end is completely redone in terms of how that sort of fits into the existing code base. It literally kind of sits alongside. The problem is we kind of have to service both the sort of older version and the newer version for a bit, so eventually it'll sort of replace the old version. But in terms of the front end, it's completely new tooling, so we're using React, we're using MobX for state management, all that sort of thing. So as far as that side of things, it was completely redone from scratch.
How do you find balance between consistency and new stuff, like innovative stuff?
Yeah, actually that's one of the kind of things that Canva prides itself on, is those sort of interesting little details and things like that, and that's something that we didn't want to lose when we kind of moved to this more systematic approach. And I think the kind of idea with the sort of systems is, and I think that there's sort of a bit of a misconception in that it just kills all creativity. But if a system is set up well, it should still enable that sort of freedom, but it takes away a lot of the sort of menial sort of tasks that you don't really want to sort of focus on, things like the sort of right padding or the right fonts or things like that sort of can be defined once, and then those sort of nice little details and touches can be sort of thought of from there. But often there's sort of, you can kind of get pretty far, like I think we're sort of taking a bit of a backwards step just in terms of like it's sort of, because the kind of new structure that we have makes it very easy to sort of use these components. That's kind of what we've gone with for the most part, but slowly but surely we're starting to sort of add in a lot of those kind of details, and I think it's important to remember that a design system, if set up well, shouldn't sort of hamper any of that creativity.
Hi. I wonder if you can
going to be looking at incorporating interactions and how you might document that or demonstrate that.
So we have, in terms of interactions, do you mean like animations or?
Animations and way things
Yeah.
react.
Yep. So we have that as part of the library already. So I showed that storybook, which sort of had, I think I was showing an alert or something in there. That includes animations. So one of the components that we have in there is animations, and we have a set number of different value, like spring values for our animations in there, as well as sort of timing and easing values and things like that. So we do need a little bit more work in that area, but it's very easy to sort of also extract those things out as a component. It doesn't have to be a literal sort of something that you sort of see, but it can be a bit more of an abstract concept as well. And in terms of like animation, you can very easily sort of distill it down to like, rather than just creating a new sort of animation or using different values every time, just sort of set them up like, here's animation 1, here's animation 2, here's animation 3, and you can sort of apply those things where appropriate.
Hi Matt, thanks for your talk. You mentioned earlier that you have separate design systems for global web and mobile. My question is, how have you tried to make sure that the experience is cohesive and consistent across mediums?
Yep. So we sort of have a structure in that we have the sort of overriding style is, or all our overriding sort of components are at that global level. So things like sort of colors and typography, all our icons are in there. Obvious things like logos and things are in there. But it also includes sort of other things like buttons and card sort of elements are also in that sort of area. And the aim is that we try and put as much as we can in that global file, so that's shared across our sort of marketing side of things, as well as all our products on all the different platforms. But the sort of main reason for the other libraries is things that, if you sort of think of components, there's things that are sort of very easy to share across platforms. So things like colors, icons, and typography are very easy to sort of share across platforms. But there's things like sort of, say the keyboards or certain sort of mobile headers, which are sort of impossible to sort of share across all those platforms. So we try to put as much as we can in that global file, but then there is sort of all those sort of platform-specific things that we have to put in their own sort of, or we don't have to, but it just sort of makes it easier as designers to manage if they're in their own libraries. And the good thing about that is that each of those sort of platform-specific libraries inherit from the global file. So they're using all the same colors, they're using all the same icons, all the same type styles, but they're just sort of composed slightly differently because that's what that particular platform requires. So.
Room for one more. Yeah. 2. Whoa.
Hi, I'm Ryan from Canva Monitor, and I have a lot of questions because I am the main author for the design system, Canva Monitor. But one question, so do you guys use any kind of like script, like HTML sketch app, so you guys can have like single source of truth and control just all the scripts and design files in one?
We have looked into them, but the sort of, at least when we looked into them, they were sort of fairly immature. I think the one that you may be talking about is the React Sketch. There's a sort of similar one, which is HTML to Sketch or something along the lines of that. And a lot of the sort of issues that we're encountering there, they rely on primitives, so they don't or React to Sketch uses primitives, so things like shape and rect and things like that, rather than HTML. So it sort of would mean that we'd have to go and build all our components. The HTML to Sketch actually works with the HTML components that we already have, but there's another sort of issue in that you sort of need to put in a lot of metadata and things like that to sort of get it to export in the right kind of way. So I guess the other sort of part to it is that we want to work sort of cross-platform as much as we can, and having them independent at the moment means that we can sort of very easily service all the platforms, and a lot of the sort of tooling available today, particularly that HTML to Sketch, only really services the sort of web platform. So I think it's definitely something that we would like to look a bit further into, and hopefully once the tooling's a bit more mature, then it'll become a bit more of a viable option. But the current state, a bit more of a manual approach has worked pretty well for us.
My question was just stolen.
All right.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear that, though, because I've done the same, trying to use React SketchUp in my own applications. The tooling seems to be a bit immature still.
Cool.
Yeah, I've read a whole pile of articles about the same thing, and they all say we've got this far, and then we built this custom code here, and then we built this custom bit there, and then that fell apart, and then we built this other custom thing, and go forward. So yeah, there's still a bit of room there.
I think the sort of one side to that as well is we don't have a dedicated team working on the design system at the moment, so it's kind of me whenever problems arise, basically. And I think sort of part of that would be setting up a team. So I think probably a big side to it would be probably firstly getting some engineers on board, and I can sort of hopefully service those engineers and have a sort of dedicated touch point to where I can go for these sort of improvements, as opposed to just like figuring out who has not enough on their plate and I can kind of just throw something at them. But I think once we sort of set up a team, and once we're in a position to set up a team, then sort of looking into those sorts of tooling, or particularly our documentation needs a lot of work, will sort of happen a lot more quickly.
Great. Everyone, please thank you.